here today. We're talking with Brian Prince, who is an architect evangelist with Microsoft Corporation. Brian, you just recently joined Microsoft, correct?
Yeah, I'm coming up on my 10th month.
10th month, so less than a year.
Yeah, that's decimal, that's not binary.
Yeah. What's the experience been like? Is it, I assume it's been a good move, or you wouldn't have lasted the second month, right?
That's true, yeah. It's been very exciting, challenging.
Brian used to work with me, he hired me,
Yeah.
and then he left to go to a big company.
Reluctantly left David behind. No, well, actually, my whole career, I've never worked for a company with more than 200 people. Usually with small startups with 30 people, or smaller, agencies and things like that. And so you're used to wearing a lot of different hats. And in order to get promotion, or I should say, to continue your career up, you need to grow the company to make the space to move into, is generally the situation I've been in. I was very nervous moving into Microsoft because...
How many people in Microsoft?
The numbers vary depending on who you ask when, roughly 90,000 people.
90, that's greater than 30.
Generally, yes. Most math systems...
Binary, decimal, doesn't matter.
So I was really worried about that. And I brought that up in every interview that I had, the famous Microsoft interview process. And every time they said, you know what, Microsoft isn't a big company, it's a lot of little companies working sometimes together.
Okay, so that's the message they lived to while they're recruiting you. Has that proved to be true?
It has, yeah. And but what I get, so I have a small team of colleagues that I work with. Jeff Blankberg, Jennifer Marsman, Bill Steele here in Heartland.
I know those guys, great guys.
So we have a small team of 4, and then my manager. I'm only a few. We play this game in our head track system or an Active Directory. You can click to see your boss and click to see their boss. So we play. How many degrees of freedom are you away from Bill Gates? And I'm only 6 away. So
you're like.
So I'm 6th in line.
Like his grandson.
Yeah. So but there are a couple 50,000 more people closer than me. But we're also told, this is your business, run it your way. Here are your goals, come up with your own strategy, and then we will allocate resources according to that. And so it's not just going to user groups. In my case, is being an evangelist. It's about being empowered to come up with the strategy that's going to work for us to achieve our goals. And that's really hard, it turns out.
Is that hard because the work is hard, or because you have to come up with the ideas yourself, or what's hard about it?
Well, it's you would think we're called, at my level, we're called ICs, individual contributors, versus a manager who's managing ICs. And people tend to bounce into that role, then out of that role, then into that. You kind of, people with career ADD do very well at Microsoft because you can jump from role to role to role. They'd like you to be in role at least 2 years, and I agree with that. But for me, it's just new, getting to know how the machine works at Microsoft. What do they expect in a strategic plan? What are my boundaries? I love to push boundaries. So if I know where those are, I'll just push them even more. It's very new to me to being an evangelist versus just being a real architect. Okay. But the onboarding process was amazing. I had probably, I can't remember the exact number now, probably 80 to 100 hours of online training pre-scheduled for me in an on-ramp process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and which was supposed to take 6 months, but I did it in 2 months because I knew my schedule. Once people find out in Microsoft that you're available as a resource, you start getting demands put on your time.
Sure.
So I knew I needed to knock all that training out. So I really hardcore went through it as fast as possible.
So that sounds really hard, but I'll tell you what, a lot of companies, they talk about training.
Yeah.
Not every one of those companies is committed to training.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that they'll dedicate the time, even though they made you run this tape at triple speed.
Yeah, well, I chose to do that. I felt I needed to on-ramp faster than the expectation. And then we have roughly monthly training commitments as well. That are we have a system for everything. So there's a giant training bank, and it says here are the courses that your role is required to take, and you need to take 4 more hours on top of that elective from this giant set of courseware. Some of it's business oriented, some of it is product and service training, right? We're about to roll out hosted SharePoint services. All right, well, customer's going to ask me about that, everyone needs to know the basics of that, even though if I'm not selling it.
Just so you can speak intelligently about
Exactly,
it. Sure.
and then know who to point them to when they need real information.
That sounds like a great job. Sounds like you're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're actually rolling up. So when I started, am I going way over time?
No,
All right.
as much time as you
All
want.
right, cool. When I started, my first day, I had to drive up. I'm in Columbus, drive up to Detroit to sign HR paperwork, hop on a plane, go to Vegas. So my first day was in Vegas, and it was a team offsite. So I got immediately just thrown into my team, the broader team of Central Region, probably 50 people there. And then at the end of that week was my first performance review, because everyone
reviewed on 1 week of performance.
Yeah, and I did really well. But we do, mid-year and end-of-year performance reviews. And while the mid-year is more about your career, where you want to go, and the end of the year is more about how you've done that year. And they were doing mid-years. So I sat down with my boss of all of 5 days in a bar in Vegas. Well, it was more like a restaurant in Vegas. And we have this system that you put in all of your life experience, and you categorize it. You say, okay, this was the job or role. And across, I can't remember, maybe 20 parameters, what that role represented, right? Were you selling? Were you marketing? Were you engineering? What were you, product management, dealing with customers, whatever those experiences were, so they get a profile of who you are. They admit that you have a life before Microsoft, which a lot of companies don't do. And then they were like, so what job do you want in 5 years? And I'm like, well, Bill Gates said he's leaving. Is that open?
The 5 guys in front of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it turns out they'd already filled his job. So it was great that they didn't say, look, you're in this position, your next step is merely to be promoted to the next position up. It was, where do you want to be in 5 years? They look at the career profile that position requires. They look at your current profile, calculate a delta, right, because we're nerds, and then they calculate a path through the roles between here and there. So for example, if I want to be a director of something, it might say, hey, look, you need to have experience carrying a quota and managing a special team of sales engineers.
Sure.
Well, I can't get that from where I am today. I need to go to maybe a sales role, over on that team, and then I can kind of skip from that over to where I really want to go. And so you see people doing that in their careers at Microsoft. You got to kind of plan out, like chess, a few steps out.
Well, that's great. So that you have some. They don't wait until you're applying for a position to decide whether or not you have the qualifications.
Yeah.
You decide well in advance what those qualifications are, and you, with their help, attempt to meet those qualifications.
Yeah, and it isn't, look, Brian, I see you doing this in 5 years. It's, where do you want to be in 5 years? We will work out a plan to get you there. Then you have to execute that plan. And so I told them, I was so new, I didn't know what the opportunities and possibilities were.
Yeah, that would be a tough question.
I did know that I wanted to be an individual contributor for at least 2, maybe 4 years. Again, to get to know the machinery, the engine that is, to get to know how I want to have impact on Microsoft internally, and what's really going to sound fun and challenging to me. So,
okay, and maybe they'll better able to answer that question.
Yeah.
I think in a couple of years, or maybe in 1 year.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Brian, thanks a lot for talking to us. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for your time.